Hey there, you awesome people! I hope your day has been nothing short of fantastic. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku's memories was altered. Instead of Katsuki Bakugou getting kidnapped, Izuku Midoriya risks his life and ends up being taken by the League of Villains. A rescue is ensured, but instead they come face to face with Deku next to All for One, calling him Sensei. They discover that Deku's memories had been altered from the point when Bakugou tells him to jump off the school roof to be reborn with a quirk. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. If you're totally vibing with this what-if scenario, drop me a comment and let your thoughts be known. And while you're at it, don't miss out on other mind-blowing what-ifs on this channel. Alright, without further ado, let's dive straight into this video. It was a huge surprise to find that the Udata security system was not as brilliant as it was made to be. Izuku was easily able to keep his distance from the school as well as the dormitory without ever being detected. There were no close calls or instances of getting caught. Either the school was completely shit at protecting its youth or Izuku was just too good. He assumed it was the former, feeling that his stealth could have been replicated by any villain. Maybe it was because he was modest that he thought that, but nevertheless, he had collected a good amount of data. Kurogiri had given him some prior knowledge about the students of U.A in the form of a piece of printed paper. It was a well-organized spreadsheet of the student roster, their quirks and weaknesses. It was a quick reference for Izuku to check when writing up his hero analysis sheets. Not only did he get the data of Class 1A, but he also achieved to find out the roster for other classes, from the hero department all the way to support, then even to general studies. He noticed everyone's routine, or so he thought. Sometimes kids would be in his blind spot as he wasn't likely to be in front of the dormitory's entrance when spying. On top of that, he was never able to look into the building no matter what angle he pushed himself in. His binoculars never cut it either, so it gave Izuku a feeling of unrest and anger. Izuku Midoriya was a perfectionist. When it came to his hero analysis, no lines were left blank. He needed to make sure that every single basis was touched, to find strengths, weaknesses, and possibilities. Tamura and Kurogiri let Izuku take his time, knowing that the boy would only get antsy if he didn't receive all the data he wanted. Even in just a few days, the villains had felt like they knew the boy for longer, maybe even years. Despite only Izuku's mind being warped, it almost felt like reality was changing all on its own as a result. After taking more notes on the students, Izuku was free to do as he pleased. Tamura had given him permission to go about wherever he liked, as long as he was not seen by any suspecting heroes. In all of his memories, Izuku had only been inside of the headquarters unless on a mission with the other members. Now that Sensei had been captured and their base relocated, Izuku felt like it was time to see the things he's missed. He went to the arcade sometimes, finally taking Tamura's suggestion to try playing games. In his words, they were good for strategy making, which left Izuku laughing to his face. The idea of Tamura coming up with a clever strategy was hilarious, which left the older villain angry, nearly disintegrating Izuku's face off. Nonetheless, the games were fun and could be applicable in certain situations. If anything, Izuku played them for pure fun. To any other passerby, he looked like just another high schooler having a good time inside of an arcade. No one knew who he was and where he came from. The disguise he wore was basic, something he borrowed from Tamura. A black hoodie, jeans, and his red shoes. For whatever reason, those red shoes were a comfort to him, and he rarely took them off. On other occasions, Izuku led himself to the apartment building where he once lived. He felt his heart pulling him to the structure he once called home, despite no one ever really being there. Izuku imagined where his parents were, and if they still lived there. It was a sad thought, and he let it be. On this day while walking, Izuku stopped near the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Maybe he stopped because the sun was starting to set, and the light glistening on the water had given him some sort of beacon. Of hope? No, it wasn't hope, maybe it was a sense of longing. He remembered the time when he was younger, and the beach had been covered in garbage and debris. Izuku couldn't help but wonder who had cleaned up the mess, and their reasoning to why someone would go to such an extent for a mere beach park. Izuku couldn't help but shed a tear, and he didn't know why. Bakugou was known to sneak out of the dormitory at odd times. His reasoning? To find Deku. Everyone in the class knew that was the reason despite his protests and vicious declarations of insults. His classmates would wonder who was taking Deku's disappearance and villainy the hardest, but the consensus was always Katsuki Bakugou. Even as he roared in disagreement and denial, everyone just knew. Half of the class understood that Bakugou wasn't ready to reveal his deepest regrets and pain, so they let him be. No one stopped him from trying to look for Deku. Kirishima had offered to go along but was given an explosion to the face as he attempted to follow the hot-headed boy. The pride swelling inside of Bakugou was still too great to accept help from his classmates. On top of that, he didn't want Kirishima to follow him when he went to the Midoriya household. Ever since he declared to Inko Midoriya that he will rescue her son, Bakugou had isolated himself from his classmates. Even if they all were friends with the green-haired brat, it was his burden alone to take on. His responsibility. His debt. Only a few choice classmates had tried to offer their help, those being people he were acquaintances with such as Izuku Kirishima and Genki Kaminari. Other offered, like Shudo Todoroki, Tenya Ida, and Ochako Uraraka. However, those were all close to Deku and felt like pebbles to him. None of them could help him. It was something Bakugou had to face by himself. He didn't need any of them. He could save Deku by himself. Bakugou had left the Midoriya residence once the sun started to set. He had continued to visit her knowing that she would be lonely, and refused to leave her in a pit of despair. Despite his own mother going to her place every day or so, Bakugou still felt the need to be there for her. Every time he came over she would bring out the cookies he liked as a young child. Even while in pain, she was still thinking of others. It was no argument where Deku had gotten his kindness. The way back to the station would have been easier if he had chosen not to take the scenic walk. Truth be told, he just didn't want to go back to the dorms. Going back meant being defeated. It meant that he didn't find Deku. There was something about looking out at the beach park as the sun descended that gave Bakugou a sense of uneasiness. To him it meant the day was ending, another day of failure. He wondered who had cleaned up the beach a while back, thinking that they must have been paid a good lot of money to even attempt something like that. What was strong was that the park had been cleaned all in a night's work. That was the true mystery. With his hands in his pocket, he stopped to look out towards the ocean. The sea breeze had blown his hair back gently. Bakugou couldn't help but frown. He turned to continue walking until he saw someone else in the distance, on the beach, staring out into the ocean. As the wind blew, the hood that rested on the person's head had fallen down, revealing a mass of green hair. His eyes widened, he continued to stare. Bakugou's body froze as the wind continued to blow. Could it really be him? Or was this some sort of illusion? Maybe something of his own creation where he desperately wanted to see Deku. When the boy turned his head, Bakugou saw a tear roll down his cheek. He knew. Deku! The name channeled itself down the beach, the waves following in its path as Bakugou used his explosions behind him to propel himself forwards. The amount of adrenaline that burst through him was unimaginable, the most he's ever had. One of his hands stopped, throwing itself up as he readied himself to land a punch on the boy. Izuku, on the other hand, recovered from his shock and reacted. A fist slammed into the sand below. Izuku used the force of the punch to throw the sand up in a smokescreen-like manner. Bakugou fell into a wall of sand and rolled onto his back, standing up quickly and gained his footing. In front of him stood Izuku Midoriya, readying his fists with a small smile on his face. Wow, Kachan, I really didn't expect to see you. The boy's eyes darkened. He would have went on to say something about not seeing Kachan leave the building, but he refrained from doing so. He couldn't give away the fact he was spying on the campus. Deku, you piece of shit, where have you been? Do you know how much trouble you've caused me? Bakugou's hands twitched, explosions readying as he panted heavily. Izuku could only ready himself. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that I was your problem. A coy smirk set Bakugou off. He threw himself at the other boy, using his right hand to land a blow. Izuku blocked it with a kick upwards, Bakugou's momentum being thrown off. It's been years, but I remember that you always start with a right hook. I think you're underestimating me, Kachan. Deku leaned in to deliver his own right hook punch, smashing his fist into Bakugou's face as he flew feet across the sand. He turned his body around to land on his feet on the sand, using his fingers to hook into the sand to stop him from moving. Shit. Bakugou's rage was getting the better of him. He should have known that even brainwashed Deku would remember about his goddamn right hook. Habits don't die without leaving a fight. DKU! He screamed out, charging right back at him. Snap the fuck out of it, you stupid brat! Bakugou used his explosions to propel himself over Deku. Then using his left hand he changed the moment of the fall to land a kick on the boy's back. Izuku fell forward and quickly regained his balance, a smile still plastered on his face. Bakugou himself could not smile throughout the entirety so far. His focus was on the boy in front of him. Knock him out. Take him back. That was the plan, but easier said than done. Why you been brainwashed? Bakugou screamed out. The anger and disgust in his voice was evident. If he could get Deku to realize his situation, he might be able to pull himself out of it. He remembered the sport festival and the match he had with Shinso. No one was able to break out of his hold by themselves, but fucking Deku did it. So he should fucking do it now. You're not a dirty ass villain, so stop acting like one, you fuckface. Izuku could only stare at Bakugou, a face that screamed disappointment. Honestly, what the hell are you even talking about? If you're trying to get me off guard, it's not going to work. Izuku charged back at Bakugou, his fist surging with power as he threw a punch in the air, sending waves of wind and sand hurling towards Bakugou. The other quickly used his quirk to create an explosion to counter it, but once the sand and smoke subsided, Izuku was there in front of him, a first thrown up to catch Bakugou right under the chin. That fucker! Bakugou winced in pain as he fell backwards. Before he could get up, two knives plunged themselves into both of his palms. A scream was released as he tried to use his explosions, the sweat slipping into the wound the knives had made and began tearing apart the skin. His explosions were failing him. His explosions were hurting him. The knives bore into his now charged palms, deep enough to exit out of his hand and into the sand below him. Izuku walked over to him, a frown appearing on his face. Kachan, why do I feel like you were holding back? Or maybe it's the fact that I might be. Izuku's eyes lit up as he leaned down. Stronger than you? His lips moved to turn into a twisted smile, the same one that Bakugou and the others had seen during Kamino Ward. The look of a villain ready to kill. Honestly, I really wanted a match with you that wasn't this disappointing, but I was told that if I were to get caught I should kill whoever catches me. You're not really an exception, Kachan. The boy sighed, standing up as he pulled out another knife from his belt. The blade shone against the sunset. The sun seemed to be falling faster as Bakugou felt his life's clock ticking. Bakugou gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with hatred and terror and remorse and guilt. Everything swirled into his vision as he felt his eyes sting. It wasn't supposed to be like this. His voice was barely audible. What? Izuku frowned again. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to be kidnapped, not you. You fucking saved me when I didn't fucking ask you to, and now you're like this, and it's my fault. His breath hitched. His lungs continued to pump out verbal spews. This isn't the fucking loser who never quits. This isn't you, and for once in your life let me save you. In that moment, Bakugou thought he saw a flicker of Izuku's old self in his eyes. It quickly diminished as it was replaced with a seething smile barred behind gritted teeth. His eyes went back to craving death. What the hell are you saying, Kachan? You trying to save me? All you've done was destroy me. So now I'm going to destroy you. Bakugou's face fell flat. His view wasn't the knife that was being thrusted down, nor was it the sun in the background finally fading away. It was the fact that Izuku had started crying, his tears falling onto his face as it mixed with his own tears that had fallen. In that moment, it looked like Izuku's face was asking for help. Whoosh! A stream of fire had been blasted from the side, causing Izuku to jump back from his spot to dodge the attack. He turned to see two boys charging towards him. Both of them were the boys Izuku had saw at Kamino Ward. Now he knew their names, Ijiru Kirishima and Shuto Todoroki. Izuku scowled, switching his knife's hold from bottom to top as he charged towards the two of them. Todoroki had sent another flame blast towards the boy, which Izuku dodged by jumping in the air. A wall of ice had created itself from the floor up to make a ceiling. Using his legs, Izuku quickly kicked down the ice barrier and landed onto the sand, his knife aiming to the nearest student. His blade clanked onto Kirishima's hardened arm, Izuku gritting his teeth as he tried another strike to the boy's head. Another arm was raised to block the attack, but Izuku was ready with his other hand himself, throwing a punch towards the boy's middle. Again, more hardening, but he felt the blow of his powered-up punch get through to the boy. Shit, Midoriya! You can really throw a punch! Kirishima smiled, wincing as he grabbed a hold of Izuku's wrist. Izuku quickly whipped back his blade to stab at the hand that was holding him. The boy let go and they both further distanced from each other. Todoroki had made his way over to Bakugou's side, helping him pull the blades out of his palms. What the fuck are you two doing here? He spat, holding onto his hands as he felt the blood bubbling down his palms. Todoroki pulled first aid out of his pouch and handed it to him. Saving you, obviously. It was too direct and Bakugou was about to yell something before Todoroki pressed the gauze onto his palms. Don't think we were just going to ignore every time you leave the dorms. You're not the only one who's driven to save him. Before Bakugou could say anything else, he heard quick footsteps race towards the location. Whipping his head up, he saw every single one of his classmates racing down the pathway to the beach. No one was missing from Class 1A, even Aizawa was accompanying them. Bakugou, are you alright? The voice belonged to Uraraka. She had ran to his side as the rest of the class caught up with Kirishima to surround Izuku. The villain boy gritted his teeth. He was outnumbered. He didn't have all of assessments ready or a well-thought-out strategy. He could learn as he fought, but when it was 20 versus 1, well, there was going to be a disadvantage. He tried to recall every single one of their faces and names but became frustrated as his mind began fogging up. Instead, he turned his attention to Bakugou, his face twisted with malice and envy. Kachan, look at everyone who came to help you out. Must be great to have so many friends, huh? Huh, KCHN? His voice was laced with venom, but at the same time sounded like a wounded puppy. Bakugou had gotten himself up, standing as he held onto his hands. You idiot! They're all your friends! He screamed out, matching the other boy's anger. Shut up, shut up, shut up! Izuku's head began to spin. The memories in his head began to fizzle in and out of existence before he sees Sensei in front of him. Everything stopped moving. His memories stopped pulling at themselves. His resolves are solid once again. He looks towards the class and begins to smile, a fist readying itself as the entire class gets itself ready for combat. Before Izuku could do anything, a warp gate appears behind him and a hand reaches to grab Izuku. DK, you know! Bakugou tried using his explosions but stopped, remembering the pain and wounds he has. He attempts to run towards the warp gate but he sees Deku disappear, leaving everyone stranded on the beach. The scream of despair echoes through the beach, reaching to the moon that had risen from the horizon. Bakugou's cries of defeat reaches even the stars. Can't believe we had to come and rescue your ass. Silence. The sound of scratching begun. Now we're going to have to take privileges away from you, Izuku. Tamura sat in front of Izuku. The boy was looking at the ground, frowning as he gripped the sofa cushion. Are you even listening right now? Tamura reached out with all of his fingers to Izuku's face, but found that the boy didn't block or move away. 4 of his fingers rested on his face, his pinky out. What the fuck is wrong with you? Tamura frowned himself, finally catching Izuku's eyes. I'm pissed, sorry. I got carried away. The feeling of disappointment had spread across Izuku's mind, causing him to feel like he needed to punish himself for it. I can't be reckless anymore, I'm mad at myself, he added. Tamura retracted his fingers. Oh, shut the fuck up, you're fine. Go get some sleep, we'll talk more later. Tamura huffed angrily, standing up as he grabbed a hold of the boy's arm, with one finger out, and forced him to stand. Izuku only moved towards the door before Tamura followed. Stop moping, you baby, do you need me to tuck you in? The mocking sarcasm was met with a snort, and then a laugh. Tamura watched as Izuku smiled to him. Good. He was still his. The scolding Bakugou received had fallen on deaf ears. Aizawa made his attempts, but found it futile and stopped, leaving him in the care of his classmates. There was nothing he could say to make the situation better, and reprimanding him would probably make things worse. After all, anyone in his place would have done the same thing, himself included. His face was sullen, looking down at the ground as he sat on one of the common room's couches. His hands were wrapped in bandages which gave Bakugou a sick feeling. Curling and his other classmates were around him, though all scattered to other sofas and even to the kitchen to give him space. Only Kirishima had sat on the floor in front of him, looking at Bakugou in the eyes. I know you didn't want help, but you gotta listen to us, man. You can't do this alone. Kirishima's words seemed to have traveled through empty space. Everyone's worrying faces watched Bakugou and any reactions he would give. I know how it feels to seek vengeance and become fueled by your own personal agenda. That was Ida's voice. His hand was placed onto Bakugou's shoulder. He didn't move to shrug it off. If we all band together, we can save him. The optimism in Uraraka's voice didn't help the situation. More voices tried to reassure Bakugou, but everything bounced off of him. It wasn't until Todoroki spoke. Did you see his eyes? Bakugou looked up at the other boy, finally giving some sort of reaction. I saw tears. Before Kirishima and I had gotten there, he must have been crying. What did you see? All eyes went back to Bakugou. Truth be told, the boy felt anxious having everyone waiting for his response. It was different than when he declared his victories over speakers or when he threatened his classmates. The words lumped up in Bakugou's throat. He looked like he was calling for help. A gasp from Uraraka pierced through the room. That means he's still in there. He's calling out for help. Bakugou. She moved closer to him, her fists balled up. He's not gone. Bakugou remained silent. Even so, what the fuck could he do? He was stuck to the ground, unable to do anything. Even with pleading eyes, Bakugou still wasn't able to save him. He was a failure. A weakling that couldn't do anything even if it was presented right in front of him. He was useless, dead in the water, a waste of space, nothing more than a Bakugou. Todoroki's voice chilled the air. Do you think Midoriya had made it this far all by himself? Everyone turned to look at him. He didn't just rely on his own strength, but he had help along the way and cherished the bonds he created. If it wasn't for him reaching out to me, I would have never been able to forgive myself. Bakugou recalled the moment in between the cavalry battle and the final tournament during the sports festival. He remembered hearing about Todoroki's past. He reached out to me and helped me, so I'll do the same to you. Todoroki held out his hand. You want to save him, but so do we. You put all this burden on yourself when you didn't have to. You think that this is a path only you can take, but that's not true. Let us walk with you. Let's save him. Bakugou stared at Todoroki, seeing the resolve in his eyes. That fucking idiot, always going around and saving people when they weren't asking for it. He took a hold of the boy's hand, nodding his head gently. Their grip strengthened. He had to let go of his guilt and fill it with something else. Something better, some kind of fuel that would drive every single one of them. The entire class gaped and cheered, moving closer to Bakugou as he kept his sights on Todoroki's. He returned the boy's smile with one of his own. To Kurogiri, it almost seemed like Tamura was postponing all of their plans to destroy the heroes. Reason? Well, it was obvious to anyone that the young man wanted to keep the new addition under his control. He spent a considerable amount of time with Izuku, sometimes talking and sometimes just being close to him. It was a foreign sight to behold, at least to see Tamura acting like that. The man was usually playing a game by himself, growing frustrated by the second until he disintegrated something nearby. Now Tamura seemed to have mellowed out, using Izuku as a catharsis for his pent-up anger and childish tantrums. Izuku, on the other hand, seemed to be fine being used as a vehicle for the older boy's desires. What their sensei had done to him was pure craftsmanship, truly something to behold. So I was thinking we can work on making a pathway towards the school, maybe underground. We could be right below them and they'll never notice. But then I guess we would have to worry about certain quirks like Mezushuji's and Kyokujira's that could possibly hear us, huh? Izuku had been rambling out different tactics and strategies to Tamura, who lied down on the dirted sofa, legs up on the armrest. He had father's hand on his face, his own hands folding on top of his stomach. To anyone passing by, Tamura looked like he was asleep. In actuality, he was very intent on listening to Izuku's voice. The best course of action might be spreading them all out in locations that don't accustom their quirks, but even then I feel they're well adapted to changes in environment. Izuku rubbed his face, scratching out something on his notebook before realizing he could have easily erased the writing instead. He took the pink eraser and began furiously erasing the work. Maybe it would be better to lure all of them away and take them all at once. It would save time, and I'm sure we can do it if we brought them to our terrain. He continued to mumble, now mostly to himself as he scribbled in his notebook. Tamura reached up and took a hold of Izuku's wrist, one index finger off the skin. Enough. You're overthinking. Tamura let go of Izuku's wrist, causing the boy to sigh in annoyance rather than relief. Izuku turned towards Tamura, looking down at him. Do you have any ideas? Did you even hear anything I said? He asked, a small smirk spreading on his face. It was met with a pat to the head from Tamura. Of course I did. I think right now you need some new perspectives. Tamura hoisted himself up to a sitting position, scratching the back of his head lightly. Not enough to break skin. I think you've been frying your brain out being locked up in here. Probably our fault for making you stay put. His hand went up to scratch his neck but stopped himself, remembering that Izuku was there. Izuku hummed thoughtfully, leaning back and stretching his arms back. He rolled his head to stretch out his neck and pulled up his notebook, reading it over. His eyebrows furrowed, rereading what he wrote in the rushed chicken scratch on the paper. What do you mean? Can I go out then? His face beamed at the thought. Tamura sighed, nodding his head. Yeah, I think you should go out, but I'm going with you this time. A questionable look came from Izuku's face while Kurogiri made his curiosity unnoticed. Tamura stood up from the sofa and walked over to Kurogiri. Take us to Hosu Arcade Walk. He took father's hand off his face and slid it into his hoodie's pocket. Izuku got himself up and ran over to Tamura's side. Wait, really? We can go out? The excitement was apparent on Izuku's face. He almost looked like a child that was given an all-sugar buffet. Tamura nearly snorted at the sight but headed towards the bartender. Kurojairi, we're going out. We'll be back whenever. It was a command. The bartender only nodded in acknowledgement as Izuku ran towards the two, nearly jumping up and down. The warp portal was out in front of them, Tamura rubbing his neck gently as to not scratch it. Izuku thanked Kurojairi and walked through the portal. Before the older boy could go in, Kurojairi placed down the glass loudly on the table. Make sure you keep him in check. We don't want another incident to happen. Are you sure this is okay? Tamura only nodded his head, placing his hoodie over his head. Yeah, it'll be fine. I'll look after the brat. The word almost sounded endearing. Kurojairi nodded once more as Tamura entered through the warp gate. The boardwalk was lively, despite it being the evening. There was a wooden walkway towards different carnival stands as well as entrances to arcades. On top of that, there were multiple carnival rides that operated by locals that are using mechanics, and even the quirks of those operators. It was a nice boardwalk where people went to enjoy themselves. The only reason Tamura knew the place is because they had a certain vintage game in the back of one of the arcades that he liked to play. He filled up the high score rankings rather easily. Izuku stood next to him, dressed like any other teenager who was going out for a night of fun with friends. A plain hoodie and t-shirt, for some reason had the kanji that said t-shirt, and jeans. No one knew that the two of them were villains, people who sought to end the age of heroes. The green-haired boy beamed at everything, taken by all of the lights and different kind of games there were. We're seriously here? Going to play games? He nearly laughed at the fact. Tamura raised an eyebrow, stuffing his hands into his hoodie pockets. Yeah. You're paying though. Tamura looked down at the boy whose face dropped. Wait. Me? I didn't bring my wallet. Actually, I don't think I even had a wallet to begin with either. I actually don't know what I've been doing. I mean, sometimes Kurojairi gives me money, but he didn't give me any now, so I don't have anything on me. Oh man, I'm sorry Tomo-chan, we came all this way and now we can't dash. Izuku was interrupted by loud laughter. Tamura covered his face with his own hand, a pinky up, but began snorting into his sleeve. Shut the fuck up, you idiot. I was joking. Come on. He took a hold of Izuku's arm with his other hand and dragged him to one of the carnival stalls despite his protests of betrayal. The game was a simple one. It was throwing the ball to hit one of the cartoon paper monsters on top of tables. The stall had a sign that read, "And no quirk cheating," to which Izuku found rather amusing. He quickly scanned at the prizes that were decorating the exterior of the stall. Some All Might plushes, no thanks, but there was some cute animal ones that Izuku noticed instead. A certain stuffed animal caught Izuku's eyes. It was a cow with a mad face on it. Its eyes were low and its body looked like it was slumping. For some reason, it reminded him of Tomo-chan. Let me do this one. Izuku grinned, looking at Tamura. Fine, whatever. Tamura took out a small pouch, handing the stall operator the money. The operator gave Izuku 3 balls, all of them worn out and soft. He took a hold of one of them and threw it up in the air to catch. Izuku wanted to test the ball and what material it was made out of. Izuku was about to mumble once more, holding the ball in his hand and his other hand on his chin. Alright, so I only have 3 shots, and to win a prize I have to hit everything down with no mistakes. That seems fine. I don't need my quirk to hit something with precision. But there's got to be some trick to this. Obviously these games are rigged for everyone, so I just need to figure out what the trick is going to be. But I don't have a test throw to figure it out, so dash. A fist tapped the top of Izuku's green mop of hair. Tamura stared at him with dull, tired eyes. Fucking just throw the ball. Izuku flushed with embarrassment and nodded his head. Oh, okay. Izuku stood in front of the stall, taking a deep breath before he aimed the ball, tossing it with his regular strength. Wham! He hit the first monster. Okay, cool, next ball. Izuku shifted to the left and aimed, tossing the ball, and wapow. Another direct hit. Now it was the last ball, final chance. Izuku took another deep breath, focusing on the target before him. He threw the ball. It was on the course to hit the final target. Izuku didn't notice the stall operator's grin, especially when the ball hit the back of the stall. Oh, too bad, kid. Here's a consolation prize. The stall operator handed him a lollipop. There was a yellow smiley face printed onto the wrapper. Izuku took it and frowned, looking at the stall and what had happened. Surely it was the operator's quirk that affected the ball in some way, but it happened too quickly for Izuku to see. He couldn't really prove that the stall operator had anything to do with it. Tamura, however, had caught wind of what was going on. He was watching Izuku the entire time, and the ball had somehow gone off course from its intended path. Move! Tamura stepped up, pushing Izuku back. He handed more money to the stall operator, taking the balls with a few fingers. Izuku was rather perplexed. How would he throw the ball with only a few fingers? He never really saw Tamura do anything like that, so he was rather interested in how he would go about the game. Tamura took a hold of the ball with all of his fingers. It disintegrated and fell into pieces of ash. Hey! The operator looked at what was once his ball. Sorry, my bad. He took a hold of the other ball and tossed it really hard towards the monsters, the ball disintegrating before it could reach anything. The stall operator was getting angrier, stepping directly in front of the game. Listen kid, give me that ball, get the hell out of here dash. Before he finished, Tamura tossed the ball at his face with only a few of his fingers. Whoops! Before Tamura could grin and challenge the stall operator, Izuku took a hold of his arm and dragged him away, turning the corner. Tamura was about to argue but saw Izuku holding the large stuffed cow in his arms. His brows furrowed, puzzled for a second as Izuku continued to peek over the corner to see if the stall operator was looking for them. Did you steal that? Tamura asked, staring in the eyes of the sullen cow. Yeah. The booth was rigged anyways. Izuku grinned, handing him the stuffed animal. Here, I wanted to get it for you. It totally reminded me of you. He laughed, Tamura taking the plush cow with his wrists. He stared at it, frown mirroring the animals. The two had chosen not to do any of the stall games, seeing as they all were rigged one way or another. One stuffed animal was good enough, plus what the two of them really enjoyed was the arcade games. The fighting games were familiar, easy to play and good when it comes to two players. While Izuku was great at tactics, he couldn't beat Tamura when it came to anything virtual. Tomu-chan, I don't think this is fair at all. You always win. Izuku pouted, watching as the screen blacked out with the phrase, Player 2 wins. Crawling from left to right. Tamura only shrugged. Fucking get better. That left Izuku with an even deeper pout. When was the last time we played an arcade game together? Izuku tapped his chin, thinking back in his memory bank. Tamura stiffened up, knowing that he wouldn't have an answer to that since it's never happened before. Shut up, stop being a sore loser, let's play something else. Tamura reached up to scratch his neck before Izuku slapped his hand down. Want to play Dance Dance Revolution? Izuku pointed, his face beaming. No. Tamura began moving to the opposite direction of the dance machine before Izuku tugged at his arm and pulled him towards it. Tamura kept his stance wide, keeping himself grounded. No. He did not want to play DDR. Izuku continued to pull, coming to a standstill as Tamura was ready to slide onto the ground to prevent the other from dragging him. All of a sudden, Izuku had lifted Tamura by his midsection, carrying him over to the DDR machine. He placed the villain on the right side while he threw quarters into the machine. Tamura stood there frozen in place, the cow sitting in front next to the machine, as he stared at the song selection screen. He was ready to turn and walk the fuck away but saw Izuku bouncing up and down, stretching his legs on his side of the machine. If Tamura left him, who knows what stupid Udata student would show up and trigger some dumb fight in the middle of the arcade. It would be better if he stayed and watched at least, but there was no way he'd be playing the dumb movement game. A pop song was selected, electro beats pumped out of the machine as Izuku began moving his feet to the corresponding arrows. He looked to be on a higher difficulty with the amount of arrows flying up and down the screen. Tamura, on his side, only had a few arrows moving from the bottom of the screen, all displaying miss whenever it passed the top gauge. It's been forever since I've played this. Izuku laughed, his face breaking out into a grin as he held onto the red bar behind him to hit all of the fast arrows. Tamura couldn't help but notice how much of an idiot the kid looked, but why was he smiling himself? Tamura stared at the screen and slowly tapped a foot on the arrow when it was close to the top arrows. His good and almost weren't as impressive as Izuku's perfect and marvelous. Tamura stopped moving his own feet to just watch Izuku move on the steel platform. He couldn't tell if the boy was using his quirk to power his legs up to catch the speed of the game, but either way it was something impressive. A few other arcade passers-by had made their way over to watch the performance, leaving Tamura with a sense of anxiety on his stomach. Though they weren't looking at him, they were all staring at Izuku. The younger boy was taking the limelight, not what anyone had intended with the new dynamic. Sensei had given Izuku to him as a gift, an apprentice, a sidekick even, so why was he shining above him? The anxiety in his stomach had turned into frustration and then detest. Why was everyone's eyes on him? He was nothing but a brainwashed kid who got himself kidnapped. He was pathetic, an idiot, something to be disposed. Tamura reached over to grab a hold of Izuku's arm with the full intent of using all his fingers. Right when he was about to wrap his fingers around the forearm, Izuku quickly stopped moving and took a hold of the man's wrist, keeping it off him. "Are you okay, Tomo-chan?" Izuku had stopped everything he was doing, letting the game continue until it ends after too many misses. His green eyes are soft and full of concern. Tamura can't help but look away. Fuck. Shit. Every time Tamura looks at Izuku and his bright, green eyes, he can't help but see something he's never seen before. He didn't know any words to describe it, but the feelings inside of him was something entirely new. "Nothing, I'm tired. Let's go." Izuku didn't seem to be bothered by losing his game, only nodding and following Tamura outside. The crowd had dispersed by then, but the anxiety was still simmering inside of Tamura's stomach. He headed out the arcade before realizing what he had left inside. "Wait, fuck, I left the dumb cow." Before Izuku could say anything, Tamura made a U-turn straight back into the arcade. He headed directly towards the DDR machine to come face to face with the small boy who had picked up the cow, looking victorious. Izuku followed behind and leaned down to the child. "Hey there, we left our cow here. Thanks for giving it back." Izuku grinned, holding his hands out, but the kid only grinned back and stuck out his tongue. "No way! Finders keeper!" The kid looked back at his other friends, all of them looking to be around the age of 6. "But it's ours, and if we could have it back now, dash. Get out of here, stink face!" Izuku blinked, looking at this young child who had such a potty mouth. He couldn't help but be reminded of a certain someone he detested with all his being. His fists began to ball, teeth baring as they were pulled tightly. "Listen, kid." Before Izuku could continue his thought, the child held up a hand and popping noises crackled at Izuku's face. "Go away or I'll use my cool quirk on you." The other boys behind the kid cheered him on, but something had snapped in Izuku. He quickly took a hold of the boy's wrist, pushing it down. The child let go of the stuffed cow and began to cry out. "Listen here, you brat, you shut up right now or I'll snap this hand off." Izuku's face became dark. Tamura was more than surprised to see him act like this to a complete stranger, a child no less. A grin cracked onto his face as he watched the child shrink back in fear. "You remind me of someone I hate, but I'm letting you know now that if you don't stop being a piece of shit, someone's going to kill you." It looked like a promise, as Izuku had promised himself to kill Katsuki Bakugou long ago. The kid only nodded his head hurriedly, and his wrist was freed. The boys quickly ran out of the arcade, screaming their heads off. Tamura almost thought he saw a puddle where one of the boys were standing at. Izuku picked up the cow's stuffed animal and handed it to Tamura before standing. "I'm feeling a bit tired myself. We should definitely get going." He gave the older boy a small smile, though his eyes looked sullen and dark. Tamura nodded and the two of them headed out of the arcade and towards the alley they both arrived at. They walked in silence for a while, standing in the dark alley as the sun began to creep below the horizon. The two of them stared at it for a while before Izuku suddenly spoke up. "Thanks for taking me out today. I know I'm not allowed to anymore since I got caught, but I had a lot of fun." Izuku smiled softly, thought it looked strained. Tamura could only nod his head as he texted Kurojiri on his flip phone, the cow resting between his hip and other arm. The sun began falling underneath the ocean's line, bringing in the darkness of the night. The warp gate opened and the two of them walked in. Izuku had always slept on the couch since their new hideout was a small, cramped room in between alleys. Something was different today, as there was an object on top of Izuku's face that was soft. Opening his eyes, he slowly lifted what was on top of his face off him, blinking. He came face to face with a stuffed sheep with wide eyes and matted wool. He blinked, squinting at it. "It reminded me of you." Turning his head, Izuku saw Tamura leaning over his cow plush on the other sofa playing an online game on his phone. Izuku could only grin, bringing the sheep toy under his arms and went back to sleep. "Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.